record.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, now, okay,
Ready?
Yes, recording now. Yeah, thanks for joining the open source webinar. Yeah, so this the session we invite Marc Bogonovich to join us to share about the Openwords project. He is the project owner of Openwords. It's a free and open source language learning web. So so pass the floor to Marc. Yeah, Marc, please.
Unfortunately, I'm still unable to
Share.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let me do some setting. Okay. 2 seconds. Okay, you can try now.
Okay.
You can try again.
Yeah, that works. Thanks, Sammy.
You're welcome.
Control L. All right, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Sammy, for the introduction, and thanks for Open Source Hong Kong for letting me share about Openwords. So what I'm going to do today is just give a broad overview of Openwords. I've done this in the past, but I'm going to give you basically an update on where we are and the status of Openwords. Okay, so Openwords is, as Sammy mentioned, open source human language learning. Okay, my name is Marc Bogonovich. I'm the founder. There's another co-founder, Shen Han. This is the social media. That's my email. If you want my other emails, just ask me afterwards. And I'm in Hong Kong. I'm actually now living on Lamma Island, if you like that place. So what is Openwords doing? Openwords for the last several years has been building a web application, and Openwords is open in two senses. First, it's open source and OER. OER stands for Open Educational Resources. It's basically open source in the educational space, okay? And Openwords is open in another context. The content is editable, and it uses a markup language, which we call the Openwords markup language. So what that's like is if you've ever edited a Wikipedia page, underneath the Wikipedia page content is a text-based format. Openwords has something comparable to that, but for language learning problems. So that's the Openwords markup language. I'll talk about that more later on. Openwords is a social enterprise. It is focused on revenue maximization, not profit maximization, for people who are not very interested on the business side. This is, it's an important point actually. So we're focused on impact maximization and building the technology and the educational resources rather than providing a return for shareholders. So we don't have a what's called a fiduciary duty to shareholders. And in the last year, this is sort of clarified a little bit. We're planning on eventually, our plan as a startup is to exit as a worker cooperative. And this is called an E2C. I will discuss that a little bit in more detail. But let's talk about that. I know this is open source Hong Kong, so I imagine that you're interested more in the technology side. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So Openwords has built an alpha web app, and as I mentioned, this problem expression language, or OWML, Openwords markup language. Openwords is language general. So any language that you can represent in Unicode, which is basically any one, you can represent in Openwords. It enables sentence construction, phonetics, reading, writing, simple vocabulary problems, and conjugation problems. So it is like a flashcard program, but it also is purposed to produce more complex problems as well. So let's take a look at language learning software that's out there. There are some proprietary forms and some open source. And we're essentially trying to combine some of the elements of both of these. Excuse me. So Duolingo, for example, is a proprietary language learning software, and it has a variety of problems in addition to vocabulary. It has sentence construction problems, for example. And Anki is a fabulous open source project, but it is mostly open source, mostly used for vocabulary problems. And so we want to be open source, but include problems like sentence construction or conjugation and problems of that nature as well. So it's a little challenging what we're trying to build. And so what does it look like? This is the web application. These are screenshots. This is an example. These are two examples of a sentence construction problem. You're going from language 1 to language 2. In this case, it is an English speaker learning Chinese. On the one on the left, it is a recognition problem. And so you can see that the problem has a display mode. That's what the learner is seeing. And it also has a text mode on the far right. And we can go through the different lines. There are different elements to that problem represented in text. Simple text, I am a cat. There are, blank elements, and then, lines 6 through 9 are the correct answers to those blank elements, followed by incorrect answers if you want. And then on the right is almost the same problem, but slightly different. Here, the Openwords markup language, which is the text file on the right, specifies that the learner is going to recall the correct answer rather than recognize it, and they'll be doing that by typing in. And so there's an attachment called type in on line 16 attached to the correct answer. There's actually 2 correct answers there. Both work. And so you can get no need to get too much into the details, but there's a relatively simple text representation of what you end up seeing in the display as a learner. So the purpose of Openwords markup language is to represent the fundamental aspects of a problem and not worry about the display, basically. So another thing about Openwords is that it isn't like there are 8 different types of problems. Actually, you're more controlling the sort of atomic elements of a problem. And you can have very, very simple problems if you want. For example, the one on the left here just is a display of information. The learner can get that wrong. The learner can get that wrong by not doing it, for example, right? So that's one way you can get that wrong. Importantly, Openwords is open. So, unlike, say, Duolingo, the backend is transparent. There is the Openwords markup language. And that's useful because we end up learning things. We've had the opportunity in the past years to do a lot of interviews and a few classroom tests where we ask teachers what they want. And one of the classrooms just wanted something like the problem on the right. And the problem on the right is just a bunch of text with an audio file. And this is, the audio file includes a call out to an external resource, right? And that's just what they wanted. And we didn't anticipate that. We thought maybe they would want to be able to make sentence construction problems or conjugation problems or something like that. But no, really all they wanted was just text and audio. And after all, if you think about that, that's for something that you can take home as a student, that's a lot better than just a piece of paper, because paper doesn't speak to you, right? So this is pretty simple stuff. And it's important, if you open the thing up, you end up discovering, you're discovering exactly what the teachers want. And I want to show one more example of a problem here, because this is a conjugation problem, and it uses essentially a fill in the blank. And it's also entirely in the language that the learner is learning. So it could be a Chinese speaker learning here, or it could be an English speaker, but importantly, they are learning French. And so here you're supposed to identify the correct form of the verb marcher, I think. And the correct answer is marche. So that's a nice example of a problem entirely in the L2. Other problems might be L1 to L2, etc. So let's talk a little bit about the Openwords markup language, because I think that's like, that is one of the innovations that we developed. It represents human language learning exercises. That is what it does. It is a language learning exercise expression language. It is intended to be simple, human readable, text-based, and it is similar in purpose to the more general GIFT exercise expression format, and that's from Moodle. Let me go into that really quickly. So when we started this, we didn't actually know about the GIFT format. GIFT format is very similar in purpose. It represents exercises or learning problems, but it is meant to cover a wide variety of things. So anything from, true and false, multiple choice. It could cover biochemistry problems. It could cover history problems. But our idea is to specialize our format on human language learning under the hypothesis that that specialization will afford some extra utility. That may not be correct. It may turn out that we should actually, in Openwords, use the GIFT format. And that's something that we would like, people to help us answer. Should we, use the GIFT format, or should we use the format we developed? Either way, Moodle is entirely open source. Oh, let me step back. Moodle is a learning management system. So what that means is teachers will use Moodle in a classroom to manage basically everything. So I use this as a professor at China Agricultural University, and you would do all of your grading on Moodle, you'd deliver assignments on Moodle, you'd make classroom announcements. You'd also be able to make lessons in the GIFT format, for example, and there'd be some automated grading there. And one of the things, as I'll talk about later, Openwords will really need to integrate with Moodle anyway. So this is something that we're going to have to explore. And it's, certainly we will want to integrate with the open source technology that's out there. And there are links at the bottom to both the Openwords markup language description and the GIFT format. So here are a couple of GIFT examples. I showed some Openwords markup language examples. I mean, it's really simple stuff. So these are two missing word problems. Mahatma Gandhi's birthday is an Indian holiday on blank, and then the correct answer, I believe, must be the second. So one thing that might be a little bit different from Openwords in terms of the group, and maybe let's say Duolingo or even Anki, is that we actually want to integrate with classrooms first as a goal. That gives us some advantages. It means that potentially in the early stages, we will have universities or schools as an ally. And this is as opposed to building an application that is meant for a random individual user learner. So we're talking about learners inside an institution. And so we have been working towards that goal, and we've conducted teacher interviews and classroom tests, and that essentially dictated our development priorities. We had different priorities at first, but once we discovered what teachers and institutions need, it changed things around. And so a classroom minimal viable product includes those two things right there. A basic web app, so that's this thing that I've already showed you, something that reads and presents learning problems to the learner. And then the second thing that they emphasize is 100% essential, and we'll understand why later on. We need to have performance tracking. You know, did the students get it right or wrong? And did they do it? Nothing super complex, just basic performance tracking. And learning management system integration, e.g., for example, with Moodle. And we have not achieved the second thing yet. We have what I would describe as a basic web app that works. It needs you know, some improvements like on the navigation system, but it works. It's a demonstration technology essentially. But in order to get into the classroom and be usable, it needs to integrate with LMS. And why would that be a good idea to get to that point? Well, there's actually a lot of advantages if you can get there. For example, you can tailor for your institution, right? So your institution may have particular kinds of learning problems. Okay, that's one. You could follow your student performance. And a lot of the advantages that I'm going to list here replicate paper, okay? And that's not bad. I mean, actually, but it has maybe additional value that comes from the technology itself, rather than, you know, us being super innovative, right? So yes, you can follow your student performance. You can follow your student performance with paper, but you have to collect that paper, you have to read it, you have to correct it, and then you need to enter it into your learning management system. And I've done this before. You've got to do it manually for 30 students. A lot of classrooms are pretty low tech, and that's where they are. So another advantage, number 3, is automated grading. So if you invest your institution's time into building material here, you're automating a part of the learning process. Number 4, your paper doesn't speak to you. So you can also have an audio element to your learning material. It is a private learning experience. This is something, you know, students can do on their own. Paper does that, of course, as well. But you can also use this alongside the classroom. So this doesn't have to take up classroom time. It could be something that you assign to your students and they can do outside of classroom or inside if you wanted. And so where were we in that regard? About a year ago, we had deployed a grant to build the remaining elements of and test the remaining elements, namely learning management system integration specifically, so that it could be used in a classroom. And that was a successful grant. Unfortunately, the funds did not materialize. And that was a huge blow for us. And I'm going to explain essentially that at the moment we're dormant. And this is in part for this reason. We have not been able to get into a classroom. We really need a classroom to build and test the technology. And we were really excited about this grant because it looked like it wasn't really going to pay us much, but it was going to pay the school a lot so that it could work with us to finish up the technology. So this was a huge disappointment. That happened almost about a year ago. I'm not going to focus on this too much. I'm going to try and keep this talk pretty quickly, but if you have any questions at the end, I'm happy to talk. There are many different revenue models that are available for open source companies. This was not something we understood at first, but we joined a group run by Creative Commons a few years ago called the Open Business Model Canvas. And what this did is it connected grown-up open source companies like Red Hat Linux, and it connected it with baby open source companies like Openwords. And they basically taught us all about the different revenue models and business models that are available for a company that doesn't make its technology proprietary. And there are a lot. So for example, and I've highlighted just two, and we would use this business model canvas to develop, open business model canvas to develop business model ideas, essentially. And our revenue model that we became pretty excited about was essentially a university school subscription. So the Openwords technology is fully open source, but the learner data are private. This is not something that should be open. And so this is a place where we could ask, universities or schools to pay, a yearly subscription for the analytics, even as basic as it might be. But since we don't have fiduciary duty to shareholders, if there's any school that's underfunded, we don't have to use this financial gate as a barrier to access to all of the capability. So if there's any institution that is for any way unable to, provide us a sustainable source of revenue for yearly use, we can just give it away for free. It's not a problem. So this was a really interesting revenue model for an open source company because it would not reduce impact and use of our technology at all, but potentially provide a sustainable source of revenue. And then the other revenue model that looked intriguing was tech consultation. In other words, we would build the lessons with them. We would become experts in our own technology and we would tailor it for them. And that one makes a lot of sense. That one doesn't quite scale as well as the first, but it's interesting. So those are a couple of the revenue models. There are many more, and I'm happy, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to talk more about it. So let's talk about the state of Openwords. It is presently dormant, but a large technology base exists. So that's in the bottom half of this slide I already showed you. It is in the web app and in the problem expression language. So we have the basic web application, which reads and presents learning problems. And but we need to build the performance tracking and learning management system. Later on, we could build a graphical user interface for a problem builder, but actually that's not as essential as we first thought, because if you think about it, Wikipedia now has a graphical user interface to build its articles, to build its articles, but for the first 15 years, it only had a markup language and text. And so that was sufficient for the entire system to work. And so maybe at some point, we would get to a graphical user interface for making problems. So why is it dormant? Largely personal reasons. When we haven't gotten funding to integrate Openwords into a classroom, I've had to work on things that would produce more financial solvency for me immediately. And so I'll share this really quickly. I have been working on another business called Ocean Editors. And Ocean Editors is a really boring business. We essentially provide English language editing services to scientists and scholars. The model is you are writing an article for publication and your science or your scholarship may be good, but your English is not so good. And so you hand it to us, we fix it, we hand it back. But this has provided me with a couple of useful things for Openwords. The first useful thing is that it has clients. So now, whereas a year ago, I didn't really have experience as a successful entrepreneur, now I have some experience building a business that gets clients and makes money. And that's actually pretty valuable. It provides some pretty valuable lessons on how to make Openwords more successful. And secondly, we've learned more about business structures themselves. And through Ocean Editors, we learned about this concept of E2C, exit to community. This is a business model that has been developed for startups by somebody named Nathan Schneider at the University of Colorado. I will provide a link to that at the end. In our case, we're going to exit Ocean Editors as a worker cooperative, and all of the insights that we develop there will be back applied to Openwords. So the tentative objective for Openwords is to also exit that as a worker cooperative. So it would be a company democratically controlled by those who contribute to it, essentially. And so that's the main lesson there. So let's get back to Openwords. So future and current challenges. We need to identify clients, or more specifically classrooms. We need to collaborate with an institution or instructor to build the technology in the classroom. We know that classrooms are interested. We've done a little bit of this in the past, but we need to do it for a full semester, and we need to do it in order to build the learning management system integration. So it's it's pretty well tested in the sense that we've interrogated teachers and really understood that this is what they want and need, and that once we're done with that, they'd be able to use it and copy it and use it in other classrooms. We need an open source community home. For the most part, all of the work has been done either by myself or by Shen Han, the co-founder, and a few other people. But it would be better if we had maybe a geographical location or a community of contributors that are providing more long-term slow growth. We need to analyze and extend the Openwords markup language, or at least compare it to GIFT and see if it's the right direction. I didn't talk about this, but we need to improve the navigation system on the web app itself. And as I have mentioned before, the learning management system integration is pretty critical. The image on the right there is one attempt at a graphical user interface for the Openwords markup language. I'm not sure it was really successful, but again, that objective has been put into the future by essentially our clients. So it's not an essential immediate challenge anyway. So just about done here. I hope it wasn't too long. Here are some links: openwords.com, openwords.org. Our code base is here. It's on GitHub, Openwords. There are a few repositories, but the one that matters is the Openwords web app, which is highlighted there. And that full link is a basic description of the Openwords markup language. But if you go back to Openwords web app, you'll also get the code base for the Openwords web app. We got a little bit of press in previous years, and actually the best article, in my opinion, was a community written article by Global Voices, which really gives a good overview that is still relatively accurate to this day of our overall parts of our overall strategy. Finally, there is this exit to community concept, which is the business type and the startup type that we're going to be adopting for Openwords and also Ocean Editors. And that link can be found there. I'm certainly happy to chat more about that particular issue. And I'd like to thank, of course, myself and Shen, the co-founder, but also Mercury Luo and Gong Yu, who over the past few years have been pretty instrumental in being involved in testing and designing Openwords. We have to thank OpenShift, which is a division of Red Hat, which has been giving Openwords free server space for basically its entire existence. They're essentially waiting for us to finish the technology and get it to graduate and be grown-up technology. And they've been very helpful. And of course, I'd like to thank Open Source Hong Kong and Sammy. And with that, I can answer any questions that you guys might have.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So it's now open for questions. So you can unmute your mic and and ask any questions about the Openwords. And also, if you have any idea, you can also share your idea with us as well.
Also, if you don't have any questions right away, you can also always email me. I'm totally available. That email works. I am on Mastodon. I'm on Twitter, and I respond to most things. So if there's something you want to ask me privately, just feel free to direct message me or email me.
Yeah. Also, after this meeting, we will also share this line on open source Hong Kong websites. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So okay. So I got questions from Yao Yin on the Zoom group chat. So
Okay.
he or she asked about any experience working with special needs students. They have problems on reading and responding with online classroom.
I have to answer in the negative, unfortunately. We don't have any direct experience with that. And it would be an interesting question about how to address that. But we'd certainly be interested in that, because I think that I would imagine that a lot of the challenges involved there are overlap with the requirements of other students, but that the content itself may have to be different, right? And so, for example, if we really need an opportunity to build lessons that will be used by in situ, that phrase or whatever, in situ. We need opportunities to test out curricula in the field. And so we had opportunities to test it for a few weeks at Indiana University in a university classroom, and we almost had an opportunity to be fully deployed in a standard Chinese classroom in the mainland. But since we are really open to any kind of group that really wants to build the technology with us, we do that regardless what their peculiar or particular educational needs are and content needs are. I mean, part of the entire purpose of Openwords is to have the content as editable as possible. And so maybe there's an opportunity there. So if you have any more thoughts about that, I'd love to chat with you about that. And I realize that there may be, depending on the quality of governance, the quality of the government, there may be resources available for those needs, and we'd be interested in working with people in that area to develop grants for that. I hope that answers your question. Please contact me.
Yeah. So Mark, you can also open the. You can also click on the chat as well. And Wai Kong wants say that thank you, Mark, for the sharing. And
No problem.
and Roman ask, may you share more on the server-side web technology under Openwords website? And will there be likely an app version in addition to the web app?
Let me answer the second question first, because I didn't quite hear the first, so I'll ask again. But the second question is really easy. I mean, the short answer is yes, there will be app versions, but you know, one of the nice things about web technology is that it is, once we became clearly focused not on individual learners, but on deploying into a classroom, it was essential that we started using the most generalized technology available, and those are the technologies of the web. So these are all, you know, these are, you know, Unicode, for example, and web app development, as opposed to, you know, specifically iOS or something like that, because it would not work if 25 out of 28 of the students could use the technology, but then 3 could not. And so that's, and it's getting to the point also where there's some cross-platform capability when you're developing with web app first. So it has to do with our resources. We need to be as cross-platform as possible, but you know, available to almost all the students. And the way to do that is first, with few resources, is web app. But in, you know, longer term, if we had clients and revenue, that would be a priority. But it's not the 0th priority or the first priority. Yeah. I hope that answers. And then what was the first question? I didn't hear that.
Maybe I fine-tune the first question.
Okay.
I think he asked about what is the server-side technology used in Openwords. Just like is using Java or using Python, something like that.
Oh yeah. What are the languages? What are the languages? So we are presently using AngularJS, Java, and yeah, well, those are the main things that we're using. There are others, and I'm blanking on it at the moment. It is on the GitHub, and actually, you know, that's another thing where, you know, if you wanted to talk to me about that in more detail, we certainly could, we could look at that in more detail on the GitHub page. But yeah, mostly AngularJS and Java.
Okay. So yeah. Any more questions or idea sharing with us? Yeah.
Now where are the, thank you, Sammy, for answering the questions, because I'm not actually sure where they are.
You can move your mouse cursor to the bottom of the screen, and then the menu bar is coming, so you can see the chat. Yeah. Maybe maybe you close the sharing screen first. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So you can see the chat.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Sammy.
Yeah.
Oh, and you know, the server side is also, I wanted to say that the server side is on Red Hat Linux OpenShift. So we're using OpenShift servers. Yeah, but I'm not actually fully, I'm more on the front end, so I wouldn't be the best person to answer that. Shenshen would be better to answer that. What technologies under Openwords website? Okay, so I think that's all the questions. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me. You know, please definitely get in contact with me. I'm definitely interested in working more with you guys.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So before we end this meeting, I would also like to take half minute to introduce about Open Source Hong Kong. So Open Source Hong Kong is a tech community in Hong Kong. So we promote and develop open source software. This our website opensource.hk. During current coronavirus pandemic, we start to organize virtual online meeting starting from July, and yeah. So the next meeting will be a fun tech. Is about the DIY open source keyboard in Mandarin. So the speaker is come from Taiwan. Yeah, to talk about how he built, how he use and build DIY open source keyboard. Yeah. So yeah. So yeah, thanks for you all of you to join these sessions. I think this is the end of this meeting. So we are looking to see you next time. And if you have any question about the Openwords, you can contact with Mark. And also if you have any other kinds of open source questions, or you love to listen to one of the open source topic, or you would like to talk about on open source topic, you can also contact with me. Yeah. So thanks for your all coming. So this is the end of this meeting. Thank you. Thank you, Mark.